Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Mobalytics counterplay video. Today we are taking a closer look at Kayle and how you can better your chances of beating her. So first off, what does Kayle actually do and where does she play? Well, Kayle is commonly played in the top lane and sometimes in the mid lane too. She is an absolute late game beast of a champion, able to easily 1v9 during the later stages of the game whilst providing some extra utility in the form of her W and her ultimate. Kayle's AoE splash damage in teamfights late game is probably some of the highest damage you will ever see in League of Legends. So it's imperative that you take her out early or you just don't let her get to that stage of the game. So what are the strengths and weaknesses of this champion? Well, first things first, Kayle has really good chase potential. With her Q's slow and her W's movement speed boost, she can easily catch up to fleeing targets and then when she's strong enough, completely remove them from play. Her ultimate is an amazing tool in all stages of the game, keeping herself or an ally safe from harm, and even if she's having a hard time, she can still protect the more dangerous members of her team, keeping her somewhat useful even if she's really far behind. This next point is going to come up a lot during this guide, but Kayle's late game is a terrifying sight to behold. She can deal massive AoE damage and wipe out entire teams when she's leveled up and got those crucial items. Level 16 Kayle is one of the best scaling champions you can pick in League of Legends. On the contrary though, Kayle's early game is pretty atrocious with absolutely no form of lane presence whatsoever. This makes her extremely punishable early game, so she'll often find herself being camped and put behind. Regardless of how powerful Kayle is in the late game, she's still very susceptible to CC though, especially so without her ultimate. If you have a crowd control heavy team comp, Kayle shouldn't be anywhere near as much of a problem. Kayle also prefers going into the side lanes to ramp up experience and gold and get to that level 16 as soon as possible. This leaves her teammates in unfavourable situations when it comes to teamfights throughout all stages of the game. So now let's take a closer look at Kayle's kit and abilities so we get a better understanding of how she plays and how we can play against her. So Kayle's passive is her bread and butter ability, and this is the main reason why she's such a powerhouse in the late game. Initially, it grants her a stacking attack speed boost when she auto-attacks, and at 5 stacks, she'll gain bonus movement speed. At levels 6, 11 and 16, this passive will upgrade, starting with her becoming a ranged champion at level 6, adding extra splash damage and on hit at max stacks when she hits level 11, and at level 16 she will gain extra attack range whilst also giving her the permanent boost she would get from having maximum stacks. Due to this being tied to her level, being able to shut her off early game and starve her of experience will be an absolute necessity when playing against Kayle. Kayle's Q is a short-range projectile that deals magic damage, slows and reduces armor and magic resist to all targets it hits. This will be Kayle's main form of chase potential and damage amplification, so you need to make sure you keep an eye out for this ability. Kayle's W is a simple single target heal which also increases the target's movement speed. Kayle will mostly be using this for the movement speed increase as the heal isn't particularly sizable. You may still want to force her to use this ability as much as you can for the sustain though, as this will limit her chase and escape options in general. Kayle's E is a basic attack steroid that deals magic damage on her next basic attack whilst also extending the auto's range. Throughout the game, Kayle will use this as an auto attack reset in trades and fights, but its main usage early game would be to acquire more farm from a safer distance. Kayle's ultimate makes a single target completely invulnerable whilst also dealing high magic damage to all enemies within its radius after a 1.5 second delay. This does have a significant mana cost in the early game, but it becomes free once Kayle maxes it at level 16. Try to find a way to either remove Kayle from a fight beforehand or switch targets should the need arise. Late game, this will not only make killing Kayle much more difficult, but it also deal a massive amount of AoE damage. If you miss or waste your CC, get the hell out of there. So, at what points in the game is the champion strongest and when is she at her weakest? Well, this one is pretty obvious and Kayle is strongest in the late game. At this point in the game, she's able to completely decimate her foes whilst also being able to block any incoming damage with her ultimate. Shutting her down with heavy crowd control and burst will be the only way you can beat her here, so be really careful at this point in the game. Kayle is by far at her weakest in the early game without much lane presence at all, no escapes and most importantly no damage. Playing around her lane and going for kills and ganking her will go a long way in setting her as far back as possible. So now let's take a look at how you can play against Kayle throughout all stages of the game. So in the early game, you're going to want to poke and trade Kayle at every opportunity you can while she walks up for CS. Making her miss farm will go a long way in slowing down her scaling. Kayle's W will most likely be used as an escape from ganks or trades, so make sure you're looking to constantly harass her down so that she has to use this ability on cooldown. This will make her far more vulnerable and open to ganks, but it'll also rinse her mana pool, allowing more opportunity to punish her and again, potentially forcing her back to base. When Kayle reaches level 6, she will be able to farm more effectively at range whilst also having her ultimate, which will give her another element of safety. Look for opportunities to force Kayle to use this ability so that you can then go in for round 2 and take her out with ease. Don't be afraid to try and roam and influence the map whilst Kayle is farming in the early game too. If you aren't in a position where you can kill, dive or punish Kayle, helping out your jungler in the river or sending it mid for a gank are great ways to capitalise on this weak part of Kayle's game. The worst thing you can do is just sit in lane and have a farm off, as this will benefit Kayle in 99% of games. In the mid game, Kayle will start looking to the side lanes to amass more farm and experience for her late game crusade. You can look to make this harder for her by ganking her and killing her, or you can choose to force team fights while she's busy. If Kayle does decide to actually join a fight either because of teleport or near where she's set up shop, respect her ultimate. This ability can be pretty hard to deal with, especially if you can't switch targets effectively. It can also be a real problem if she has a particularly scary allied carry, as this will make them much harder to shut down. Now, although Kayle won't be at full machine gun mode yet, she could still do some decent damage in the mid game, so don't leave her unchecked and take her out swiftly. In the late game, Kayle will become the transcendent carry monster that she is, able to deal massive AoE damage to your entire team if you're all clumped up. It's imperative that you stay out of range if you can. No matter what type of target you are, whether you're a tank or an AD carry, she's still going to cut through your health like a hot knife through butter. Dealing with Kayle in the late game is all about crowd control and burst damage. If you can lock her down and kill her before she can use her ultimate or Zhonya's, you can win the fight, and if not, good luck. If your team lacks crowd control in general, the late game is going to be pretty hard to win against this champion. Another viable way to deal with Kayle late game is to hit her from different angles. If you're all grouped up in one place, her AoE splash damage will genuinely kill you all in seconds. But if you can find a flank and approach her from various angles, it could allow you to burst her down without getting exploded. Finally, let's talk about some itemization that you can build to help better your chances of beating this champion. First off is the most obvious, and that's going to be magic resist items. Kayle can output an absolute ton of magic damage, so building magic resist will be an enormous help. You can also go for anti-burst items. Any extra lifelines or shields that can help you survive Kayle's AoE damage should allow you to survive and turn the tables against her. Due to Kayle having no hard CC, Zhonya's Hourglass is also a good shout, as there will never be a time where you cannot activate it. This may give you time to get a major cooldown refreshed or allow your team to swoop in and kill her. Reducing Kayle's attack speed will also never be a bad thing, so if you're playing the right champion, a Frozen Heart could also be a really good option. Well, that's going to bring us to the end of this Kayle counterplay video. Hopefully you now have a better understanding of how this champion works and how you can better your chances of beating her. That's all for us here at Mobalytics, and we'll see you in the next video. Take care.